I believe that freedom comes from a right relationship with God. And if a person hasn't come to that place in their life, they never really are free. Because the truth of the matter is that there is conflict in this world. And we know that conflict often comes from him who desires to bring disharmony and strife into the heart of a human. And so to be able to deal with this disharmony, to deal with this strife, there has to be a higher power. And so until a person comes to that place to where they have accepted the reality of God, ask God to come into their life and to help them and to lead them and guide them into the truth of the reality of the totality of God's kingdom and his great ability and the ability for the human to trust. And that's a very difficult hurdle oftentimes to go over, simply for the fact is that we have these limitations many times, but they're not limitations that are given by God. They are limitations that we find in our own heart and our own perspective. To say this is that it's us who puts the limits, because we put a limit on what we believe that God is capable of. And there just comes a place in the heart and mind of many human beings to say, well, I believe God, but. And then we say, well, I believe God could do this particular thing, but when it comes to this over here, that's too big for God to handle. Well, if that's our perspective, then we're not going to be able to totally have a peace and confidence in our heart, because we don't really believe that God is capable of all things. And I say it's a difficult thing for us humans to often come to, because we are as humans, we are limited. There is definitely limitations as to things that we can overcome. That's why we give ourselves over to the Lord and ask him to come into our heart and work through us. To me, that's coming to full freedom in the aspect that I'm not counting on me. And to even say, I know my limitations. I know who I am as a person who literally was made out of the dust of the earth. But to realize, and this is so important for us to understand this, that in the creation process, as we read in the book of Genesis, how that God created man out of the dust of the earth. But then what is so key is that he breathed the breath of life into man. And that breath of God is what is eternal. And that's the thing that we have to realize, because that tells us that we are not just flesh with all the limitations of the flesh, but we are also spiritual. And the spiritual person we are has the ability to go beyond even death, even into eternity, to live forever with God. This is Pastor Jack King with the gospel on the radio broadcast.